The Curse of Nefertiti. The desert wind whipped sand against Dr. Emily Carter's face, stinging her eyes. She squinted at the towering sandstone cliffs before her, the setting sun painting the ancient landscape in hues of orange and crimson. The air was thick with the scent of dust and history, and Emily, an archaeologist specializing in ancient Egyptian culture, felt a thrill course through her. This was it, the site of the long-lost tomb of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, a tomb shrouded in legend and whispers of a powerful curse. She glanced at her team, a small group of seasoned archaeologists, their faces etched with a mix of excitement and apprehension. There was Professor James, Emily's mentor and a renowned Egyptologist, his weathered face creased with concentration. Then there was Omar, a young and enthusiastic Egyptologist with a talent for deciphering ancient languages. And finally, there was Ben, the team's skilled engineer and tech whiz, his eyes always glued to his equipment. "Are you ready, team?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. "Absolutely," replied Professor James, his gaze fixed on the entrance to the tomb, partially hidden by shifting sand dunes. The team had been following ancient texts and cryptic clues for months, their pursuit leading them to this isolated location deep in the western desert. Now, after years of searching, they were finally at the threshold of their discovery. Omar adjusted his camera, his fingers trembling slightly. "I can't believe we're actually here," he whispered, his voice laced with awe. "Don't let the excitement cloud your judgment," Ben warned, checking his equipment. "We're dealing with something powerful here, something that's been undisturbed for centuries." With a deep breath, Emily led the team into the tomb, the cool darkness enveloping them instantly. As their eyes adjusted, they saw ancient hieroglyphs carved into the walls, depicting scenes of offerings, gods, and the pharaoh's eternal journey to the afterlife. The air hung heavy with the silence of centuries, punctuated only by the sound of their own breaths and the distant echo of the desert wind. They carefully navigated a series of corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness, until they reached a large chamber adorned with intricately carved reliefs, depicting the pharaoh and his royal family. But it was the imposing sarcophagus at the center of the chamber that stole their breath. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its surface gleaming with polished black obsidian, adorned with intricate gold inlays depicting the sun god Ra. The sarcophagus was not only larger than any they had seen before, but it was sealed shut with an unknown type of metal, resisting even the strongest tools. "This is unlike anything we've ever encountered," Professor James murmured, his brow furrowed with confusion. Emily knelt beside the sarcophagus, studying the carvings with a practiced eye. "These hieroglyphs, they're different. They don't depict any known figures from Egyptian mythology." "Perhaps it's a different deity," Omar suggested. Suddenly, Ben's voice cut through the silence, his tone laced with alarm. "Guys, there's something wrong with the air. The oxygen levels are dropping rapidly." They looked at each other, a wave of panic washing over them. The air felt heavy and oppressive, making their breaths shallow and labored. "It's a trap," Professor James stated, his voice firm despite the fear that tightened his chest. "There's a hidden mechanism in this chamber, and it's beginning to suffocate us." They scrambled to find a way out, but the entrance to the chamber was blocked by a wall of shifting sand. "It's a curse," Omar choked out, his face paling. "The legends are true." Just as the air grew unbearable, a faint creak echoed from the sealed sarcophagus. They watched in horror as the obsidian surface began to glow with an unearthly light, and a crack appeared on its surface, widening with each passing moment. Then, With a guttural sound, the sarcophagus split open, revealing a figure unlike any they had ever seen. It was a woman, draped in shimmering black fabric, her face obscured by a veil of ebony silk. But it was her eyes that froze them in terror. They burned with a cold, unholy light, an unnatural intensity that seemed to pierce their very souls. "Nefertiti," whispered Professor James, his voice trembling. "The legend of Nefertiti, the Pharaoh's forsaken wife, who cursed the tomb with eternal vengeance." With a swift, fluid motion, the woman emerged from the sarcophagus, the veil falling away to reveal a face of chilling beauty. Her eyes, now blazing with malevolent fire, locked onto Emily. "You have disturbed my eternal rest," she hissed, her voice a cold, slithering whisper that sent shivers down their spines. "Now, you shall pay for your trespass." Terror gripped Emily as she realized they were trapped in the tomb with a vengeful spirit. The legend, once dismissed as mere folklore, had become a terrifying reality. "We didn't mean to disturb you," Emily pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "We were just following the clues, trying to understand the past." Nefertiti laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the tomb, the sound of 1,000 tortured souls. "Understanding? You think you can comprehend the power of a pharaoh's wrath? You think you can escape the consequences of your actions?" She raised her hand, and the chamber plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from her fiery eyes. A bone-chilling cold swept through the chamber, sending goosebumps erupting across their skin. "Run!" yelled Ben, his voice cracking with fear. But as they turned to flee, they realized they were trapped. Nefertiti's presence seemed to solidify the walls, the sand outside the entrance swirling, forming an impenetrable barrier. "We need to find a way out," Omar said, his voice tight with panic. "There has to be another exit, another way." But Nefertiti was relentless. She moved with an unnerving grace, her presence like a shadow that seemed to consume the very air they breathed. She glided towards them, her icy gaze piercing their souls. "You cannot escape my wrath," she whispered, her voice dripping with venom. "You will be forever bound to this tomb, forever trapped in the darkness." Their only hope lay in the tomb's secrets. Emily, her mind racing, desperately searched for a clue, a hint, anything that could unlock the chamber's mysteries and provide them with a way out. She looked at the strange markings on the sarcophagus, the hieroglyphs that seemed to twist and writhe as she gazed at them. She felt a strange connection to the symbols, as if they held a key to her survival. "The hieroglyphs," she exclaimed, a sudden realization dawning on her. "They're not just decorations. They're a code, a map to a hidden exit." She quickly sketched the symbols in her notebook, studying their patterns and relationships. She noticed a specific pattern, a sequence that repeated itself within the glyphs. It was the key to unlocking the chamber's secrets and escaping Nefertiti's wrath. "I think I have it," Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear that still gripped her. Professor James, Omar, and Ben, their eyes wide with hope, crowded around her as she began to decode the hieroglyphs. "The symbols represent the movements of the stars," Emily explained, her voice barely a whisper. "They indicate the specific alignment of the constellations at the time of Pharaoh Amenhotep's death." "But what does that have to do with escape?" Ben asked, his voice filled with skepticism. "The constellations are the key," Emily answered, her gaze fixed on the ceiling of the tomb. "They indicate the precise location of a hidden passageway, a passageway that can only be accessed when the stars are aligned in the same pattern as they were on the night of the pharaoh's death. But how do we know when that was? Omar questioned. Emily looked at the calendar inscribed on the sarcophagus. It's written here. It's the 15th day of the month of Epagomeni, the final month of the Egyptian calendar. Suddenly, Omar gasped. But that's tonight. They looked up at the ceiling, a chill running down their spines. The stars were aligning above them, mirroring the celestial pattern etched into the tomb's ceiling. "We have to act fast," Professor James said, his voice tense with urgency. "Nefertiti won't let us escape." Following Emily's instructions, they scrambled to decipher the complex astronomical map, their fingers tracing the intricate patterns of the constellations. As the stars shifted and aligned, a section of the tomb wall began to glow with an otherworldly light. A secret passageway, concealed for centuries, emerged before them. "This is it," Emily said, her voice filled with hope. "Our escape route." They lost no time in entering the passageway, their steps echoing in the silent corridor. They ran, their hearts pounding, the chilling presence of Nefertiti hot on their heels. The passageway was narrow and winding, lined with ancient murals depicting scenes of death and resurrection, their colors fading into the darkness. The air was thick with a cloying, sweet scent that made their heads spin. "We're running out of time," Ben said, his voice strained. "The air is getting worse." They stumbled into a cavernous chamber, their lungs burning for fresh air. The chamber was filled with artifacts, statues, and precious metals, treasures of the ancient pharaoh. But their eyes were drawn to the opening in the ceiling. It was a narrow shaft, leading out to the surface. "It's the only way," Emily said, her gaze fixed on the shaft. "We have to climb." They looked up at the shaft, its dark mouth seemingly miles away, a daunting climb. But they had no choice. They had to escape, or face Nefertiti's wrath. Ben, always the resourceful one, quickly assessed their situation. He gathered loose stones and scraps of cloth, fashioning a makeshift rope ladder. He secured it to the opening, and they began their perilous climb. The climb was exhausting, their arms aching with exertion, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They could hear Nefertiti's voice echoing from the chamber below, a chilling, maddening whisper that threatened to consume them. "I won't let you escape," she hissed, her voice growing closer. "You will stay with me forever." One by one, they reached the opening, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. But Nefertiti's grasp was unrelenting. She reached out, her icy fingers grasping at Omar's leg, dragging him back into the darkness. "Omar!" cried Emily, her voice filled with despair. Omar, his face contorted in agony, struggled against Nefertiti's grip. He knew he had to make a choice that would seal his fate. He reached out for the rope, his hand gripping it tightly. "Go, Emily!" he yelled, his voice raw with fear and determination. "You have to go! Get out of here!" Emily and the others looked at each other, their hearts filled with horror and a terrible sadness. They knew Omar was sacrificing himself to save them. With a heavy heart, they continued their climb, pulling themselves out of the tomb, the fresh desert air a welcome relief. They collapsed on the sand, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion. "We have to go back for Omar," Emily said, her voice firm despite the tears that streamed down her face. "We can't leave him there." But as they looked back at the tomb, they saw Nefertiti's chilling figure standing at the entrance, her eyes blazing with malevolent fury. She raised her hand, and the sand began to shift, burying the tomb's entrance beneath a mountain of sand, sealing Omar's fate. They watched in despair, the horror of their loss etched onto their faces. They knew they could not escape Nefertiti's curse. She had taken Omar, and their escape was a bitter victory. "We have to leave," Professor James said, his voice raspy with grief. "We have to tell the world about this, about the curse of Nefertiti." They left the tomb, their hearts heavy with sorrow and the weight of their newfound knowledge. They knew the world would never believe their story, but they had to try. They had to warn others of the dangers of disturbing the past, of the power of ancient curses. As they walked away from the tomb, Emily looked back at the sand dunes, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desert. She knew Omar would never be forgotten, his sacrifice forever etched into their memories. She vowed to find a way to break the curse, to free Omar's soul from Nefertiti's grasp. And she knew that the pursuit of knowledge could be a dangerous path, a path that could lead to unexpected consequences and heart-wrenching losses. But she also knew that the pursuit of truth, of understanding the past, was worth the risk, and she would continue to unravel the mysteries of ancient Egypt, honoring the memory of those who had come before her, and hoping to find a way to break the curse of Nefertiti. The end. If you like the story, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was there anything that surprised you? Who's your favorite character in the story? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.